What's up, everybody? I'm Dr. Dale Brown. I'm the Wild Doc. I've been following this Peds Brain Doc on Instagram because I think she puts out some good information. But she has this video that she recently posted about the discussing the measles outbreak in Texas, and then we're gonna get into it. But basically, there was some information in there that she claims and states as fact and truth that I want to show you that is not truthful and not factual. So watch the video.
I lost a bunch of followers after posting about the importance of the MMR vaccine, and you know what? I'm gonna do it again because I'm a pediatric doctor and we're not here just for followers. Let's start with the first thing that I can tell you with confidence as a neurodevelopmental doctor, that the MMR vaccine and vaccines in general do not cause autism. The paper that came out about this was completely redacted. There's been over 300 studies looking at this, millions of patients, and paper after paper has never shown a valid causation between vaccines and autism. Diseases that vaccines protect against, like the MMR vaccine, are not always benign. In fact, one of the most devastating diseases that I've ever seen is SSPE. This happens when an everyday healthy kid gets the measles, they recover, everything is fine. Years later, they start losing their memory, become confused, develop personality changes, develop seizures. Eventually, this disease progresses to death. It still happens in countries where vaccination rates are low, not because kids are refusing to get the MMR vaccine, but because they don't have access to it. It's fully preventable by not getting measles, and we have a vaccine that's 97% effective. What about
So I want to teach people something. What she just did there, whether she knows it or not, is a very tactful approach to convincing somebody to sway one direction or the other with an emotional story. Stories move people more than facts. So I'm just going to throw that out there as I do my videos. I know I get kind of fired up and emotional about it, but what she did was told this story of a child. You could literally visualize this child regressing neurologically and then ultimately dying, and then saying in these poorer countries where they just don't have access to the vaccine, how do they have access to other vaccines like the DTP vaccine? Big Pharma overpricing them. What's the reason? I'd like to know. Like, if it, we can get there. We could bring the syringes. There, anyways. That's why it's like, I'm just like, she's using something, and then she's using something that is it's a pulling at your heartstrings, trying to get you to make a decision towards the direction she wants you to go. And then she says it's fully preventable. That was her exact statement. So I've literally been creating a PowerPoint presentation for this, and, just trying to get this information out there as quick as possible. So even though quick is not, when it's gathering information, quick is definitely not my middle name. You can ask Bailey and my staff. So she talks about the SSP. So that's the Subacute Sclerosing Panencephalitis, a condition primarily the vast majority of the time caused by measles infection, she says. So she says that it's this is her exact words, it's fully preventable by not getting measles. And she says that they have a 90%, 97% effective vaccine. All right. So that statement is so easily proven wrong. So this is where we play the game. Is it ignorance or is it evil? And again, I've done another video and I've said I would probably lean on the direction that she is not evil. Like I don't really get that sense about her. I think she has a good heart. She believes what she's been taught, and she's just regurgitating that. I doubt she actually looked up the CDC's website. Pop it up right there, Bailey. And it says right here, 368 of the cases of subacute sclerosing panencephalitis in the United States, citizens who met the case definition of SSPE and had onset of symptoms between 1969 and 1981. 55% of those, that's only 202, of those cases had a history of measles infection. So only roughly half of them had a measles infection history. 14%, again, this is where her statement becomes either ignorant or a lie. 14%, 51 of the cases, had a history only of measles vaccination. And 17% had a history of both. So, and then they go on to say that the remaining 14% gave no positive history of having natural measles infection or measles vaccination. So for her to say that it's fully, when you speak in absolutes, I really try not to speak in absolutes when I'm talking about any subject that has controversy behind it, because I don't think we can do that. I don't believe we should do that. Except when I would say that I'm absolutely positively sure that I will never let somebody vaccinate my children. I'll speak in an absolute right there, but going on. She is wrong. The vaccine is known to cause the exact condition she's wanting you not to take the vaccine, or she's wanting you to get the vaccine because of a condition. She says that if you don't get it, your child might get it. Okay. So here's a paper, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine induced subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. So just take her story and apply it and think about the parents who chose to vaccinate their child, and then their child succumbed to SSPE and died as a result of them giving that vaccine to the child. Again, I want you to see that that's emotional. I want you to make an educated decision. That's what I'm going to try to do throughout this video, okay? In any video that I do. I believe you are a parent who loves their children. That's why you would watch these videos. That's why you would listen to the peds brain doc, because you're ideally probably trying to find information on how to help protect your child, how to stay healthy. You want to learn. But I'm asking you, question anything somebody says, especially when they speak in absolutes. All right. So another study in 1977, epidemiologic studies of measles vaccine and subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. The risk of SSPE following measles vaccination was 0.5 to 1.1 cases per 106, appears to be less than the risk following measles, 5.2 to 9.7 cases per 106. That's not 106 cases of measles. Every one of them is going to, like 10 of them are going to get panencephalitis. You got to pay, that's behind a paywall. Okay. But so take that and understand that it's not fully preventable via vaccination. It could actually be caused by vaccination. But one could say, the peds doc would likely argue at this point if she ever watches this video, she would say, well, if the vaccine holds a lesser risk of this condition, then shouldn't we take the vaccine over the potential of the natural infection? That's an arguable point. That's a discussion I'm willing to have, okay? But we have to measure all health outcomes, not just a single solitary severe situation. Because the reality is, when you look at panencephalitis, while it may be caused by a dormant, persistent infection of measles, natural virus, or the virus given to the child by the vaccine, okay, that's one type of encephalitis. And while the prognosis, let me jump ahead here, so if you look up panencephalitis, primarily caused by the measles virus, but other viruses can also cause it, progressive and insidious, so therefore it's not completely preventable by the vaccine. Again, another point. Progressive and insidious onset with symptoms including personality changes, seizure, dementia, and involuntary movements. It has a poor prognosis, with most patients dying within a few years of diagnosis. Panencephalitis is a rare and fatal condition. Okay. And they say that the cause, encephalitis, has a wider range, and they go into encephalitis, but there's differences here. Encephalitis caused by a wide range of virus, bacteria, parasites, or autoimmune disorders. Symptoms: fever, headache, stiff neck, confusion, seizures, and coma. Prognosis varies depending on the underlying cause and severity of the infection, all right, or severity of the persistent measles virus from the vaccination is what they should also include in there, because again, I've shown you studies to that fact. Most cases resolve with treatment, but some can lead to permanent brain damage or death. So let's bounce back up. Journal of Pediatrics: acute encephalopathy, that's pathology due to inflammation of the brain, followed by permanent brain injury or death associated with further attenuated measles vaccines. A review of claims submitted to the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. They go through 48 cases, ages 10 to 49 months, met the inclusion criteria after receiving measles vaccine alone or in combination. 8 children died, and the remainder had mental regression and retardation, chronic seizures, motor and sensory deficits, and movement disorders. Don't those symptoms sound a little bit like the symptoms included in an autism diagnosis, which she says has nothing to do with vaccinations? There goes my aggression again, right? Conclusion: this clustering suggests that a causal association between measles vaccine and encephalopathy may exist in a rare complications of measles immunization. The reality is, and then this is the other causal relationship. Let's just look at encephalitis. So yes, panencephalitis has gone down due to the decline in natural infection of measles. So while that one has gone down, it was a very rare condition. Encephalitis in U.S. children has done what? And that was this is a 2017 paper. It says the reported incidence of encephalitis in children in the U.S. and England increased over the past 10 years. So from 2007 to 2017, encephalitis, brain inflammation has been going up. But they go on to say and this paper does not say that it's due to vaccines or anything like that. Don't misconstrue what I'm showing here. I'm just saying that while one type of encephalitis may have gone down, another type of encephalitis has gone up. While maybe the less severe encephalitis has gone up, if the total number of children who are still dealing with encephalitis and a portion of them can die, are we really saving lives in the grand scheme of things? That's the question that really needs to be answered before we have all the information that would be ideal for parents to make a truly educated and informed decision on whether the risk versus benefit ratio favors getting the vaccine or possibly getting natural infection. By not taking the vaccine, we have to understand that we would need all of that to make this decision. And I'm not going to be able to cover all of that in this one video. So they go on here, which may be partially attributed to increasing use of immunosuppressive therapies. Immunosuppressive therapies are used in autoimmune conditions. And I've done videos in the past, and I will continue to do videos along the way that you'll want to look forward to watching. But there is clear indication. I mean, over there in the corner, I've got a textbook. Bailey might pop it up on the screen. A textbook that is called Vaccines and Autoimmunity. It's well established that vaccines can trigger autoimmune disorders, and with the increasing number of vaccines accompanying the increasing number of children and young adults and people dealing with autoimmune immune diseases, maybe we ought to question, is the benefit worth the risk? When it comes to vaccinations, that could potentially lead to the need of increasing use of immunotherapies. So encephalitis does occur in people who are immunocompromised. So HIV is a known cause of it. Other bacterial, persistent viral infections, those things are known causes of it. Vaccines are a known cause of encephalitis as well. So why are we seeing an increase in inflammation of our children's brains and then a need for more immunosuppressive therapies, bone marrow, and solid organ transplants associated with the increase in encephalitis? So why are we seeing a need for all of these therapies that increase the incidence? Because the bone marrow or solid organ transplants, like, why are people needing more organ transplants? Why are people dealing with encephalitis more? Why are we needing to put more and more people on immunosuppressive drugs? We should start asking the questions. Is there a chance that vaccines are pushing that epidemic of chronic diseases that necessitates the need for those drugs or those surgeries? So then, while the vaccine may not be directly causing the encephalitis, but if the vaccine caused the caused the autoimmune disease, and then the autoimmune disease necessitated the use of immunosuppressive drugs, and then those immunosuppressive drugs, while they're immunocompromised, increase the risk of persistent viral or bacterial infections within the central nervous system that then wound up with encephalitis. So therefore, the vaccine ultimately was the trigger that lit the fuse that eventually the bomb went off in the brain, and there's your encephalitis. They're not going to do all the research necessary to make sure that that scenario is right or wrong. I don't see them actually doing it, but we have to ask the question, is that a possibility? And we are left as parents in the dark to just use logic and say, if I see chronic serious health conditions going up, encephalitis going up, neurological conditions devastating our children going up, and vaccines are going up, at some point in time, you got to ask, do we want to jump ship? Get off this train? No wonder they're asking questions. And then when an individual like this MD puts a video out there like this, that is so easily proven to be either, the claims being made are either wrong and she made a mistake, maybe she just repeated what she was taught, or she has knowledge that she's actually deceiving people. Because the research paper, look at this. Hang on. All right, here it is. Okay, so the research paper, she pops up when she says there's been 300 studies done. That is a lie. I would love to, for you, Peds Brain Doc, I am challenging you to give me all 300 studies. Studies. Not papers discussing other studies, not papers in PubMed that just are doctors and pharmaceutical agents saying, we don't believe vaccines cause autism. I want to see the 300 studies you're referencing. But she pops up this study, okay? It's a meta-analysis. So it's, vaccines are not associated with autism, an evidence-based meta-analysis of case control and cohort studies. I'm going to have to do a little bit of what I have to do when I discuss this. So I'm going to make mention that Dr. William Thompson and Frank DiStefano they were key authors in a 2004 paper for which William Thompson came forward and said that we committed fraud. When we did the 2004 study and we said that vaccines don't cause autism, Dr. William Thompson gave Congress documents showing that they actually decided to rewrite the study design, because when they were originally doing it, they found what was called a huge association between the MMR vaccine and autism. And then after they found a huge association, they decided to get a big old garbage can out and attempt to throw all those documents away, for which William Thompson held on to all of them because he knew what they were doing and being instructed to do was illegal. And here's the thing I'm going to challenge again, Peds Brain Doc. Have you called your congressman or congress-lady and implored them to subpoena Dr. William Thompson and have an open discussion, an investigation into his claims that he and his co-authors committed fraud. So that is one of, so make note, that reference 17 in the paper she's referencing as this big old study that says vaccines don't cause autism, that's one of the 5 they chose. Again, 5. She said there's 300. They chose and eliminated out of 900, watch this, out of 929 potential relevant studies identified and screened for retrieval, they narrowed it down to only 5. So there are 900. Do you guys all get this? There are 929 references that they retrieved from the medical literature that are discussing the potential of vaccines causing autism. And to come to the conclusion that vaccines don't cause autism, as they do in this, they only wanted to include 5 of those references. Can anybody say bias? And then one of those 5 references is fraudulent. Like, the author came forward and said we committed fraud. And ironically, in this paper, they said that the risk of bias. So again, they published this it was received and written before 2013, and that is the year before William Thompson came forward and confessed that he committed fraud on that paper that they used to say that vaccines don't cause autism. Do you see how convoluted this gets? The irony of it. The year before this paper was published, the year after it was published, one of the 5 references they used to say that vaccines don't cause autism, according to all of this data, came out to be fraudulent. The author confessed. How ironic. But even in this, watch this. Even in this, oh my gosh, this right here should, I'm just going to say it, piss every mother and father and even medical physician. You guys should be pissed. Peds doc, I think your brain should explode when you read this. If you got any common sense, and I'm going to back up. I'm sorry. I just is when I read this stuff, I don't have a child that's vaccine injured. I've never had to report to VAERS for one of my children. Thank God. But this paper says, again, Peds Brain Doc says that no studies found an association. She makes that claim. She attempts to claim that Wakefield study, that one paper that wasn't studying, looking at the association. Wakefield, all he said in that paper, that just lit a fire underneath every single health institute and World Health Organization, CDC. It was a witch hunt because all he did was he said, the parents told me. He's literally he was just repeating that the parents told him that most of the symptoms their child with autism suffered came on after the MMR vaccine. He was just reporting what the parents were telling. It was one sentence. He never made claim. He said we should look into it further. And they went after him. They didn't say, maybe we should look into this. I see your concern. No, it was an all-out witch hunt, destroying his reputation in an attempt. So it wasn't going after the information and data. It was going, and again, when they go after the information and data and look at it, the CDC had to commit fraud. Remember that fact. So Wakefield didn't commit fraud. He just mentioned something, and they had to retract it because they couldn't have parents' opinion and observation being potentially pointing the finger at their holy grail of vaccination. But, all right, back to this article again. The one research study that she posts. It says, we recognize the paper that she says and holds up, and at the same time, basically saying that no papers are saying, other than Wakefield's one paper, she alludes to that. None of them say vaccines cause autism. But in fact, the paper that she referenced says, yes, there are studies that show vaccines cause autism. Because it says, we recognize that there does exist data in VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. That's what that stands for. That reported positive results, meaning a correlation between vaccines and autism. Okay? Doesn't prove causation. It just shows that there is an association. However, due to the aforementioned reasons, these papers were excluded. So if you go in and read it, the aforementioned reasons is that it's a voluntary reporting system. And they said, therefore, it may not be accurate numbers. But every single time that there's ever been a study, let's look at rotavirus vaccine and its association and causation into intussusception. It causes into the envelopment of the intestines into the digestive system and a possible life-threatening serious issue. They had to pull that rotavirus vaccine off the market. Well, it wasn't until the CDC came out and said, yes, the rotavirus vaccine causes intussusception, that then medical physicians began to report the claims that parents, the reports from parents, that their children were succumbing to intussusception after the vaccine. They said it was 12 to 15 times, I believe. Don't quote me exactly on that number. I don't have this. This is one just coming off the top of my head. So until the CDC admitted and said this condition is caused by the vaccination, doctors weren't reporting it. And in fact, it was thousands of times more, thousands of more children were actually having that condition caused by the vaccine than what were being reported to VAERS. So in this study, Peds Brain Doc uses to make the false claim that no study shows association. They say there's studies that show an association. And some of those studies use VAERS data. In VAERS data, we're not going to include those studies because it's a voluntary reporting system and is subject to the bias of incomplete reporting. So less. But even with the significantly less number of reports being put into VAERS, there was still a statistical significance. So if we actually had doctors doing their jobs and we had a system that was mandatory for reporting of medical conditions coming on after vaccinations like autism, then guess what? We would have thousands more reports. And therefore, the statistical significance would only have the opportunity to go up. So excluding studies because there's an insignificant, a lesser degree of reports going into that system, but yet it was still showing an association, shows the very bias I'm talking about within the medical visit. There's no logical sense to say, if there's less reports than what are actually happening, let's not include that study when it's statistically significant. I mean, does that make sense, Bailey? Like, please reassure me that I'm getting my point across here. So this is what pisses me off, this next statement. Grab hold of this. Let me repeat it. We recognize, the authors of the study, we recognize that there does exist data that in VAERS that reported positive results between vaccines and autism. However, due to the aforementioned reasons, these papers were excluded. Literally the last sentence in this paper, it says, for parents who do notice a significant change in their child's cognitive function and behavior after vaccination, I encourage you to report these events immediately to your family physician and to the vaccine adverse events reporting system. So do you see why I'm pissed off? Imagine a parent reading this study and actually grasping what they are saying. On one hand, they're saying, oh, VAERS data, we're not going to include. We're going to ignore the fact that VAERS data already shows an association between vaccines and autism. We're going to ignore that. We're not going to use that. That means nothing to us. Because what we want is we want 5 studies, one of which was fraudulent, to say that vaccines don't cause autism. So we're going to eliminate that. Oh, on the other hand, though, parents, if you do see your child succumb to autism or cognitive decline after vaccinations, make sure that you report it to VAERS, the system that we don't really care about listening to. See, that's why I got a little bit attacky, frustrated, angry, aggressive. See, it's like a woosah. You know, everybody watch Seinfeld. Woosah, or no, wait, was it woosah or Serenity Now? Serenity? Sanity later. See, I got a joke a little bit. This is not a funny subject, but I have to calm myself down for a minute because it is. It's like you literally are insulting the parents when you say, hey, you know, we see an association with a little bit of reports that are coming into VAERS, but we're not going to listen to that. We don't care to take that into consideration when we're discussing whether vaccines might cause autism. Oh, yeah. But if your child does have something happen after a vaccine, go ahead and report it to VAERS. It just makes no sense to me whatsoever. And that's why, Peds Brain Doc, how do you feel about that statement? And how do you feel? Like, here was the thought I had too. Again, I know that I jump around a lot. I'm sorry. Here's the thought I had. Did the Peds Doc, Brain Doc, did you actually read this study? Because some of the studies that are in the references that they chose not to use actually show there is an association between vaccines and autism. Did you analyze why and how? What criteria they used to eliminate any study that possibly showed that there was an association? Did you study it to that detail? What do you think about that? What do you think about not using VAERS report system? I'd love to know your thoughts. And on top of that, again, I mentioned, this is why I have CDC whistleblower. If you look it up on C-SPAN, where Representative Posey read the sworn testimony of that author, Dr. William Thompson, and said, we got a big old garbage can and threw away the documents in an attempt to... This is the way I see it. He basically said, another irony, Julie Gerberding, the head of the CDC at the time when William Thompson was publishing that study in 2004 that he says was fraudulent and he was ordered by his higher-ups. He doesn't say Julie Gerberding specifically, but he was ordered to cover it up and attempt to destroy the documents. Julie Gerberding went to work for Merck immediately following exiting the CDC. Guess who owns the MMR vaccine? And in fact, owns a monopoly on the MMR vaccine sales in the United States. Merck. So the head of the CDC at the time in which they did a study to say that vaccines don't cause autism, for which a author came forward and said that it was fraudulent, she got to go to work for Merck afterwards. The same company that she, or the CDC at least, was protecting their profits. Do you see why parents question the legitimacy of the claims from the CDC and other organizations or people who want to repeat the CDC's lies? We question it. Because there's no way around that until you subpoena Dr. William Thompson and you have an open investigation to where the world can see and figure out for themselves and decide for themselves whether we need to trust the CDC any longer. Oh, one of the other studies in the 5 was, an author was Paul Thorson. And if you look him up on the OIG Fugitive website, you'll find out that he is America's most wanted. He's a felon because of fraud and money laundering for what? In relationship to the research the CDC hired him to do to say that vaccines don't cause autism. Again, these are the studies that, again, this is my brain, sorry. But the William Thompson study, so go back, not the Paul Thorson study, the William Thompson study. So in this study that the Peds Brain Doc mentions as being that big study that shows, she says the 300 studies, they took 5 studies. They didn't use 300. So they said that Dr. William Thompson's study had, when they rated it for the risk of bias, they said it had low or like very low risk of bias. How ironic. They're like, oh, that study, that one right there with DiStefano and William Thompson, published by the CDC, funded by them, man. Oh man, that's a low risk of bias. I believe the CDC, they tell the truth. No, we said that a year ago. And now the author's coming forward and saying that they were quite biased and they decided to commit fraud afterwards and attempt to destroy the documents. Sounds like a high level of bias to me. But we won't retract our study that uses that study to say that vaccines. It's like they retracted Wakefield's study when he just said what the parents told him. But then when William Thompson came forward, the CDC's, that study, that hasn't been retracted. Any study that uses it to say that there's studies that prove vaccines don't cause them, they haven't been retracted. I would think that, I would just think that, if an author of a study came forward and said, hey, I committed fraud. Yeah, I lied. That study, we manipulated the data to cover it up and we tried to destroy it. And I'm going to come clean. Don't you want to retract my study that I'm saying was fraudulent? No. We don't want to. No, it proves the point we want to make or make people believe that we can make. So we're not going to talk about that one. All right. But yet, again, the Honorable Bill Posey, back in 2016 or 2013, I apologize, he spoke to Congress and said, why are you not demanding the Danish government extradite Paul Thorsen? So this is Paul Thorsen, not William Thompson. The reason they don't want to extradite him, put him in jail, have a trial on him, because that becomes greater and greater level of public knowledge that would call into question their claim that vaccines don't cause autism, because everybody would think, wow, he published a couple studies the CDC and the medical community uses to say that vaccines don't cause autism, but he's a fraudster and money launderer, and CDC and U.S. government doesn't even want to bring him back to the United States to charge him with the crimes he committed. Bill Posey called for it and discusses. It's probably because you don't want to shine any light on the reality of and we'll say it, potential of deception and corruption behind the vaccine, CDC, autism situation. So, okay, I think I've actually covered everything. Way out of the original order I thought I would cover it in. Peds brain knock, vaccines in general do not cause autism. I covered that. The retracted paper, the 300 studies, the study that she utilized. Oh, the other icing on the cake would be this. There's a couple. I quote several pieces of icing, I guess. Maybe it's like icing on the cake with a little bit of ice cream on the cake too here. So here we go. So on top of all those two fraudsters, and we need to give grace to William Thompson because he came forward and said, hey, what I did was wrong and I need to confess it. So I forgive him. Took him 10 years to come forward to confess, but he deserves forgiveness from us all. I can't imagine being a parent who chose to vaccinate their child after his study. Maybe a parent read his study and was like, oh, there we go. There's the information. That's the study I needed to convince me that there is no risk to give my child the MMR vaccine. And then the child succumbed to autism. And then now they learn, wow, that was the convincing study that convinced me to do the vaccine. And now I'm learning that the author is confessing that they committed fraud. Can you imagine being that parent? Yes, I know that I already talked about the fact that using stories like this are emotional, but it's a thought that I have. On top of those two situations, here's another one. And this type of stuff is actually available through the Children's Health Defense. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s, he's part of that organization. Through FOIA requests, lawsuits to force the CDC to release information, they found that the CDC decided to not publish a study for which they found that the hepatitis B vaccine increased the risk of autism 7.6 times. 5 times the risk of sleep disorders, 2.1 times the risk of speech disorders, and 1.8 times the risk of neurodevelopmental disorders. Why did the CDC decide not to publish a study that they did? There are papers, there are studies. PedsBrain.com, did you know about that? Did you know about the Verstraeten study that wasn't published that the CDC conducted with our taxpayer dollars and then decided that the 7.6 times the risk of autism in the children who received the hepatitis B vaccine over those who didn't? They just said, no, let's not put that on PubMed. No way. Or what about this? Institute for Pure and Applied Knowledge, IPAK. Vaccination and Neurodevelopmental Disorders, a study of 9-year-old children enrolled in Medicaid. This study was published in January 2025, this year, found roughly a 240% increase in autism in the vaccinated. Or how about this one right here? So those are human observation trials. Or how about this one? So first thing you do in science, or one of the things you can do in science, is you observe. You observe, you watch with your eyes, and you look at the differences between vaccinated, unvaccinated, fully unvaccinated, or you got this one vaccine, and then this group didn't get that one vaccine like the Hep B. So that's one vaccine put up that risk, 7.6 times. Now, IL-4 mediates the delayed neurobehavioral impairments induced by neonatal hepatitis B vaccination. That involves the downregulation of IL-4 receptors in the hippocampus. I know. Hang in there. In brief, these experiments showed that IL-4 mediates. That's an immunological mechanism. That's an interleukin that triggers inflammatory responses. Mediates the delayed neurobehavioral impairments induced by neonatal hepatitis B vaccination, which involves the permeability of the neonatal blood-brain barrier and downregulation of the IL-4 receptors. They say that these findings suggest that the clinical events concerning neonatal IL-4 overexposure of that interleukin, including neonatal hepatitis B vaccination and even allergic asthma in human infants, may have adverse implications for brain development and cognition. So after giving the equivalents of the same dose that infants, baby children get, human beings get on day 1 of birth, they gave the same equivalency of that vaccine to newborn rats, okay? And they observed. And what happened? Via an immunological mechanism upregulated by that vaccine, it caused neurodevelopmental conditions in those experimental animals. They can literally take and explain the mechanism by which the vaccine, that Hep B vaccine, causes brain damage. It includes symptoms that, while in mice or rats, are similar to the symptoms that are in children who are diagnosed with autism. So they even have experimental animal studies showing a mechanism, like a scientific immunological mechanism. Like you can, with a placebo-controlled trial, true placebo saline, or just no injection at all, vaccinated, never vaccinated, in human beings. That would be the better trial. Instead of experimenting on human beings, we could do animal vaccinated, animals not vaccinated. Which ones have more brain damage? The vaccinated. That's what it says. So Peds doc. Again, I always get that wrong. Peds brain doc. Have you read that study? What do you think? All right, let's make sure that I've covered everything. Well, I haven't. One more. And if you don't want emotion to help you make decisions, you don't want court cases and simple cases, because that's not as strong evidence as those peer-reviewed studies that I'm mentioning. But this was a case of a child. So again, the reason I pulled this court document was because she is saying that you should go get your children vaccinated with the MMR vaccine. Because measles, on rare occasions, could cause a severe neurological injury in panencephalitis that eventually leads to their death. Yes, that's horrifying. I pray that it never happens to anybody. But while that's tragic when that happens, why aren't we taking every child? Here's my thought. They have the Vietnam Memorial. They have the World War II memorials, the Civil War memorials, and we memorialize soldiers that fought in battle and gave their lives fighting for a cause. The entire medical community claims that you should all get vaccinated. We should all get vaccinated. All our children should be forced to be vaccinated, many times some will say. They're basically saying we should vaccinate our children for the greater good. That's a statement oftentimes made. Why aren't we creating and memorializing all of the children who die due to the fact that they were vaccinated? Why does the medical community call them liars? Why does the medical community ostracize them? Why does the medical community tell them to be hush, hush, don't tell anybody? They should be memorialized if it is truly for the greater good, if it's truly for the greater good, those lives devastated and lost for the greater good should be memorialized. This was a court case. Harry and Gina, I'm going to butcher this name, Tabinas, administrator's estate of Elias Tabinas, who is deceased, against Secretary of Health and Human Services. Okay, again, this is the United States Court of Federal Claims. This was filed July 31st, 2012. Okay. These petitioners were originally part of the autism petition for vaccine compensation and joined the omnibus autism proceedings. But they had to leave and no longer file a claim for autism because their child died. And in fact, the court awarded them millions of dollars because they were able to prove that the DTP or the DTaP vaccine, that's the acellular pertussis vaccine still utilized in the United States, vaccination administered on December 26, 2000, caused Elias to develop a seizure disorder that eventually led to his death. So in Pete's brain doc is telling that story of what can happen when somebody has panencephalitis. Just remember that we could say, and we could share, and I believe we probably should share it more often, that there are children dying as a result of what they say is the greater good. So, this is a lot, and there's a lot more to this discussion. But we're in the midst right now of probably quite a few parents around the United States very worried, very scared of measles. There's some that are angry towards those who are not vaccinating their children, but that's our choice. And we should live in a free country that allows us to make that choice. And we should live in a world where truthful information is shared, not absolutes, like the PEDS doc attempted to say. I'm going to point that out. I know. We should live in a world where if we want to protect these children, I'll give you an example. I don't have fear of measles. I know a lot of parents that don't fear measles. Shoot, I'm going to share with you in the future when we do some more videos just on discussion surrounding measles alone and the information and research out there. I'm going to share with you ways in which you can protect your child. You can help them overcome. One of which is just nourishing your child, making sure that they're fed healthy foods, that they're breastfed if you can do that and would do that. That's how you can substantially lower the risk of measles being anywhere near a risk to your child's life or health long term. They, in fact, have studies on vitamin A. Even the World Health Organization recommends it. There's medical organizations that recommend it. So when this child recently died from a measles vaccine, or a measles infection, supposedly in Texas, I really want to know, did they at least do what the World Health Organization and other medical institutions recommend? Or was there neglect at the medical level of those hospitals and they never administered vitamin A? I believe we all deserve to know that, because in third world countries, impoverished nations, they show that a single bolus or large dose of vitamin A at hospital admission, that giving it to mother and instructing her to breastfeed her baby I believe that's the way the study is done. It may have been some given to the baby as well. Don't quote me on exactly how to administer it. I'll bring that information to you in a future video. It cut the mortality rate of measles by 50%. So they saved half the children who were stricken with severe measles. And again, that's the ones that went to the hospital. Like, they could save thousands of lives with that simple supplement. Did they do that for that child? Or was there neglect? And that information, I hope that you all use, that if you're concerned, what's some of the highest sources of vitamin A? Things like beef liver, cod liver oil. Yes, carrots and other vegetables have beta carotene in them that can be converted by our body into vitamin A, but there are some people out there that have poor conversion capacity to convert beta carotene into the active form of that hormone to be able to utilize it in your immune system to protect you from severe viral illness. So I advocate for, remember the old days? Parents giving their children when they had the measles or the chicken pox or they had a fever, here's a big spoonful of cod liver oil. We should do that. That can save lives. Research shows it. We could be discussing ways in which, if somebody wanted a vaccine, we could say, you can make that choice, but you deserve to be given information that's truthful and gives you a broad overview so that you can make an informed decision, like I'm trying to do with these videos. And then if somebody doesn't want to do that, you shouldn't be saying, oh, the only way you should even try to prevent measles or save a life from measles is by vaccination. We should say, you know what, if you're not, you should know these things that you can do to help your child have a stronger, healthier immune response against the measles. So that, again, one more image and study. There's a study, and you can see that, pop it up there. You can see that in the United States, the measles reported cases and deaths per 100,000 population from 1912 to 1959. That's before a measles vaccine was available. You can see that the decline in measles-associated deaths was plummeting down to near statistical levels of 0%. It was below, it was 0.00, I believe that's the stat, 1% fatality rate per year. So it's like there's a reality that there was and there is ways we can protect children if parents choose not to vaccinate. We should be openly discussing it. And by not openly discussing that, maybe that's what I see as a way in which the medical community is allowing for children who are catching the measles to die. So if communities around the United States and around the world religiously do not want to get those vaccines, I don't believe we should hold them down and force them. So why isn't the medical community surrounding them and saying, or encouraging them and teaching them and saying, this is how you help your child who's not vaccinated be protected against severe illness from these infectious diseases? Like, that would mean they care more about the child than they do about the vaccination. Right now, it appears to me that the medical community cares more about the vaccination and getting people to take the vaccine than it does about meeting people where they are and saying, this is how we can help you. Even if you don't want to do that, even if we disagree that you're not going to do that, we still want to help you, and here's how we can help you. Why wasn't that discussion? Why isn't that discussion happening right now? Well, that's the next discussion I'm going to have here on my channels. So I wish you all well. I apologize again for getting fired up periodically. So Peds Brain Doc, it's nothing personal from me to you. Your video just got me fired up when I saw what you said, and I knew, because I'd read that study you posted, and I knew what you were saying was wrong. And now that it's brought to your attention, I would love to hear you come forward and say, I see what you're saying, and I'm willing to read the study, and I'm willing to have that discussion, because I have on another video, I've called you out. I've asked, can we have a public discussion about this subject? From a father of 5 unvaccinated children, will you help me understand why you are where you are in your thinking? And would you help me understand where maybe I'm wrong? I'll give you that opportunity. All right, everybody, I appreciate you. I love you all. I hope everybody sees where my heart's coming. All right. Again, I'm going to mention that, for probably legal purposes, I am saying that if I mention that I'm a doctor in this, many people have called me Dr. Dale Brown, the wild doc. I am a chiropractor. But when I talk about this subject specifically, all right, I'm not talking about it from a doctor's point of view. I'm not claiming to be the doctor that can tell you whether to or not to take a pharmaceutical. I am simply saying, as an informed and educated father who loves my children and who loves all of these children, and my heart breaks for the child that was lost. I really wish I could have done something, or somebody could have done something to save the child's life. But, that's where I'm coming from with this. All right. So there's my legal disclaimer. I'm a father when I talk about this subject. A father who wants you as a parent as well to make an informed decision and not get false and misleading information that skews your decision in one direction or the other. So, all right, everybody, take care, and please share this video. What I used to say was when there was just the likes or the shares on Facebook, you know what? Share this information. Don't just like it, because sharing it is the only way we're going to save lives. Take care, y'all.